For 31 years, my wife Dorothy drove 40 minutes out of town every third Saturday morning and never once told me where she was going. I never asked because I trusted her completely. I trusted her the way you trust the floor beneath your feet. You don't think about it. You just walk. But when she died on a Tuesday in October, and my sons showed up at the hospital before her body was even cold, with a real estate agent's business card and a quiet suggestion that I start thinking about my options, I realized I had been standing on something I never truly understood. Within 72 hours of burying my wife of 38 years, I was sitting alone in the house I built with my own hands, with a padlock key I'd never seen before, and the address of a storage facility 40 miles away, written in Dorothy's handwriting on a card tucked inside her Bible. They thought I was a broken old man with nothing left to lose. They had no idea that my wife had spent 3 decades building them the most expensive lesson of their lives. Before I tell you what I found in that storage unit, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people you loved most, drop a comment below. You are not alone. My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 68 years old. I spent 40 years as a finish carpenter in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, building other people's homes, cutting their crown molding, fitting their cabinets, smoothing their hardwood until it shone like glass. I was good at my work, and I was proud of it. Dorothy was a third-grade teacher at the same elementary school for 26 years. She was the kind of teacher that former students still wrote letters to decades later. We weren't wealthy people. We clipped coupons. We drove used cars. We saved for vacations we rarely took. But we were solid. The way houses built right are solid. I thought that solidity extended to our family. My older son, Marcus, is 41. He works in commercial real estate. He married a woman named Bridget 10 years ago, and Bridget had the particular talent of making every family dinner feel like a business negotiation. My younger son, Daniel, is 38. He's softer than his brother, more like Dorothy in temperament, I always thought. But soft things bend under pressure, and I would learn just how far he was willing to bend. Dorothy was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition 3 years before she died. She didn't tell me the full prognosis until the last year. That was her way. She carried heavy things, quietly so the people around her could keep walking upright. I knew she was sick. I didn't know how sick until the doctor took me aside in February and told me we were likely looking at months, not years. I went home that night and held her hand, and we didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. 38 years of marriage doesn't need a lot of words at the end. She died on a Tuesday. I held her hand when she went. The boys were there. Both of them. Standing on the other side of the bed, looking at their phones, between the moments that mattered. I noticed it but told myself grief looks different in different people. I was generous with that interpretation. I wouldn't be for much longer. The funeral was on a Friday. It was a small service, the way Dorothy would have wanted. Wildflowers instead of roses. Her students' letters read aloud instead of formal eulogies. I sat in the front pew and stared at the wooden casket and thought about the 40-minute drive she took every third Saturday for 31 years. I had meant to ask her about it. I always meant to. But there was always something else. Always another Saturday. Always the quiet assumption that we had more time. After the service, we went back to the house. Marcus and Bridget arrived in their car, and Marcus was already on his phone before he came through the door. Daniel came in behind them looking pale and unsettled, the way he always looked when Bridget was steering things. She had a gift for steering things. She set her purse on Dorothy's kitchen table like she owned it and looked around the room with the measuring eyes of someone calculating square footage. "Dad," Marcus said, coming to stand beside me at the kitchen counter. He put his hand on my shoulder, and I could tell by the weight of it that it wasn't comfort. It was the hand of a man about to say something uncomfortable. "We need to start having some practical conversations." I told him we could have practical conversations after I'd had some time to breathe. He nodded and said, "Of course. Absolutely. Take your time." And then Bridget sat down at the table and said, "The thing is, Robert, the market is really good right now. Houses in this neighborhood are moving fast." I looked at her. She met my eyes without flinching. I had always known what she was. Dorothy knew too. I remember her saying once, very quietly, while we washed dishes together, that Bridget reminded her of a contractor who cuts corners. The house looks fine until the first hard storm. "This is my home," I said. "Of course it is," Daniel said quickly, from the doorway. He looked at his brother. "Marcus, it's too soon." "It's never too soon to plan," Marcus said. "Dad is 68. He's going to be alone in a 4-bedroom house. The property taxes alone. I've paid property taxes on this house for 33 years, I said. "With 2 incomes," Bridget said pleasantly. "Now it's 1. A pension and Social Security, Dad. I ran the numbers. It's tight. Really tight." She had run the numbers. She had sat in my wife's kitchen and run the numbers on my finances before we'd even put Dorothy in the ground. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something. He looked at the floor. They left an hour later with the understanding, they said, that we would talk again soon. Marcus pressed the business card of a realtor into my palm on the way out, a woman named Susan who specialized in estate sales. He said it was just an option. He said he wasn't pressuring me. He said it with the calm confidence of a man who believed the outcome was already decided. I stood in the driveway and watched their taillights disappear, and then I walked back inside and sat in Dorothy's chair, the wingback by the window where she used to grade papers, and I tried to remember how to breathe. The house was very quiet. It smelled of her lavender hand lotion and the lemon wood polish she used on the furniture. I sat there for a long time. Then I remembered the Bible. It was sitting on her nightstand, where it always sat. I picked it up and held it for a moment, running my thumb along the worn spine. When I opened it, the card fell out. Before I even turned to the first page, it was a small white card, the kind that comes with a flower arrangement. On it, in Dorothy's careful handwriting, were 2 lines, the name of a storage facility in Denham Springs, and a padlock combination. Below the combination, she had written 4 words, "You'll know what to do." I sat with that card for a long time. I turned it over, looked at the back, looked at the front again. 31 years of Saturday mornings. 40 miles. A combination. I thought about calling Marcus. I decided against it. Whatever was in that storage unit, Dorothy had addressed the card to me. Not to us. Not to the family. To me. She had tucked it in her Bible and waited for me to find it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed we had shared for 38 years and stared at the ceiling and thought about every 3rd Saturday I had waved to her from the porch while she backed the car down the driveway. She always wore her second-best clothes, I realized. Never her best, never her oldest. Her second best. The clothes she wore to do something she considered important. I left the house at 6:30 in the morning. The drive to Denham Springs took 45 minutes in the early fog. The storage facility was off a state road, a long, low building with orange roll-up doors and a chain-link fence. A man in the front office, heavy-set with kind eyes, looked up when I came in and told him I was looking for a unit rented by Dorothy Mitchell. He typed her name into his computer and went still for a moment. Then, he looked up at me. "Are you Robert?" he asked. I said I was. He reached under the desk and pulled out an envelope. My name was written on the front in Dorothy's handwriting. "She left this here about 4 months ago," he said. "She told me a man named Robert Mitchell would come in after she passed. She said to give him this, and to tell him." He paused, reading from a sticky note attached to the envelope. "That Unit 44 has been paid up through the end of next year." I took the envelope. My hands were not entirely steady. I thanked him and walked back outside. I sat in my truck for several minutes before I opened it. Inside was a single folded letter, 2 pages, written front and back. I will not read you every word, because some of what Dorothy wrote was for me alone, but I will tell you what she needed me to know. She told me she had started going to that storage unit the year after Daniel was born, when we were barely keeping our heads above water financially, and she had lain awake one night terrified that if something happened to me, she would have nothing. She said she never told me because she knew I would have told her to spend the money on the family, on the boys, on the house. She said she had decided, quietly and alone, that the best thing she could do for me was to do what I would have stopped her from doing. She had started small. She bought a 1-acre parcel of scrubland in the parish for $3,000, money she had saved a little at a time over 2 years without my knowing. Then, another parcel, then another. She bought land the way other people collect things, slowly, patiently, always the same kind of land. Rural, undeveloped, cheap, and ignored. Over 31 years, she had acquired 22 separate parcels across 3 parishes. She had watched the parishes grow. She had watched the developers come. She had done nothing but wait. She told me the storage unit held every deed, every title, every tax record, and every relevant document, organized in labeled boxes. She told me she had already spoken to a real estate attorney named Carla Fontenot, who had an office in Baton Rouge and who was expecting my call. She told me the attorney had a full accounting of the portfolio. At the bottom of the second page, in slightly shakier handwriting than the rest, she must have written this part near the end. She wrote, "I know what Marcus is like. I know what Bridget is. And I know that Daniel will follow his brother, because he always has. I need you to promise me you won't let them take what you built. Because, Robert, you built all of this. You just didn't know it. Every week you handed me what was left after the bills and told me to use my judgment. I used it. Every single week for 31 years. This is your judgment, my love. Use it well." I folded the letter and put it in my shirt pocket, against my chest, and I walked down the row of orange doors to Unit 44. The padlock opened on the first try. Inside, against the back wall, were 7 bankers' boxes, neatly labeled in black marker. Next to them were 2 plastic filing tubs with lids, and on top of the first tub, held in place by a binder clip, was a manila envelope with the attorney's name and phone number printed on the front. I sat down on the concrete floor of that storage unit and opened the first box. The deeds were organized by parish and then by year of purchase. The oldest ones were brittle at the edges. The most recent ones were crisp and white. I pulled out a deed from 1994. A 2-acre parcel she'd bought for $1,100 in a parish that now had 3 new subdivisions along its northern edge. I pulled out another from 2003, 5 acres for $4,000 in an area that was now adjacent to a major commercial corridor. I kept pulling. I am not a financial man. I never pretended to be. But even I could see what I was looking at. I could see the dates and the locations, and I could remember what those areas looked like now compared to what they had been. I sat on that floor for over an hour, just going through the boxes. Then I called Carla Fontenot. She answered on the second ring and said, "Mr. Mitchell, Dorothy told me you'd call. I am so sorry for your loss." She was a remarkable woman. She was a remarkable woman. Her voice was warm but precise, the voice of someone who is kind and also very good at her job. She said she had been Dorothy's attorney for 11 years. She said she had the full valuation ready. The total appraised value of Dorothy's land holdings was $4,300,000. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of that storage facility, and I said nothing for a long time. The morning fog had burned off. The sun was coming through the windshield and warming my hands on the steering wheel. $4,300,000. My wife, the third-grade teacher who bought generic cereal and darned the elbows of my work shirts, had quietly, invisibly, without a single word of complaint or pride, accumulated a real estate portfolio worth more than $4 million. I thought about the storage unit behind me. I thought about 31 years of second-best clothes and 40-minute drives. I thought about every Saturday morning I had kissed her on the cheek and told her to drive safe. Carla told me that everything was in a trust, the Dorothy Ruth Mitchell Living Trust, established 8 years ago. She told me I was the sole trustee. She told me the boys were listed as contingent beneficiaries, meaning they could receive a distribution if and only if the trustee chose to make one. Before I hung up, I asked her one question. I asked her if Marcus or Daniel had contacted her. There was a brief pause. She said that yes, Marcus had called her office the day after the funeral. He had identified himself as Dorothy's son and asked about the estate. She had told him she was not at liberty to discuss Dorothy's affairs with him and that he should wait to hear from me. She said he had not taken that well. I thanked her and sat in the parking lot a little longer. I thought about Marcus pressing that realtor's card into my palm. I thought about Bridget and her numbers. I thought about Daniel looking at the floor. I needed to know something. I needed to know who my sons were when they believed the lights were off. So I decided to give them a test. I drove home, changed my clothes, and did not shower or eat. I sat in Dorothy's chair until it was late afternoon, and then I called Marcus. I told him I had been to the bank. I told him there was a problem. I let my voice crack when I said it. I told him that Dorothy had co-signed a personal loan I'd taken out 3 years ago when the roof needed replacing, and that I had fallen behind on payments without realizing it, and that the bank was saying the account was seriously delinquent. I said the number was $18,000. I said I was afraid. I said, "Son, I don't know what to do. I need help." The line was quiet for a moment. I could hear Marcus breathing. Then he said, 18,000. Dad, I don't have that kind of liquid cash right now. I've got projects in the pipeline, but cash flow is tight. I mean, when would you pay it back? Once the house sells, I said. Right, he said. And then the tone shifted, just slightly, just enough for me to hear it. But Dad, if there's a lien on the house, that complicates the sale. The realtor would need to know that up front. It might affect what we can list it for. A pause. Did you talk to Daniel? I called Daniel next. I told him the same story. Daniel was quiet for a long time when I finished. Then he said, Dad, are you okay? How are you holding up? And I thought for one moment, one brief, fragile moment, that he might be different, that the test might not land the same way. Then he said, honestly, I think this might be a reason to move faster on the house rather than slower. If there's debt attached to the property, we need to get ahead of it. Bridget was saying the same thing, that we shouldn't wait. Bridget was saying. He was consulting Bridget about what to do with my debt, with my house, with my life. I'm scared, I said. I don't want to lose the house. It might be better this way, Daniel said softly. You'd be free of the upkeep. You could get somewhere smaller, easier to manage. Assisted living isn't. I thanked him for his time, and I hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen of my house for a while. I thought about Dorothy, writing that letter. I thought about her lying in that hospital bed in October knowing what her sons were. She had known, and she had loved them anyway, and she had protected me from the knowledge because she thought it would break something in me. She was right that it was breaking something. But it wasn't the part she feared. What it was breaking was the last hesitation I had about what came next. I called Carla Fontenot and told her to move forward with the full legal process. I told her everything she needed to know. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, I've been waiting for this call for 8 years. Dorothy prepared me well. The next morning, I drove to a men's clothier in Baton Rouge that I had driven past 100 times but never entered. I bought a charcoal suit, a white shirt, and a pair of leather shoes that cost more than any single item of clothing I had owned in my life. I got a haircut at a proper barber shop, the kind with the striped pole, where a man named Gerald took his time and used a straight razor on my neck. I looked in the mirror when he was finished, and I did not entirely recognize myself. I looked like a man who had decided something. Marcus had called twice while I was at the tailor. I had not answered. He had also texted, Dad, we need to talk about the loan situation. Let me and Bridget come over Thursday. I texted back. Come. Thursday at 10. Bring Daniel. I spent Wednesday evening in Carla's conference room going over every document. She walked me through the trust structure, the land holdings, the legal position I was in. She explained what I could do and what I couldn't do. She was thorough and direct, and I liked her immediately. Before I left, she handed me a folder and told me everything I needed was inside. On Thursday morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table when they arrived. I had made coffee. I was wearing my new suit. I heard their cars pull up, heard the doors close, heard Marcus and Bridget talking quietly as they came up the walk. Daniel came separately. I watched through the window as he got out of his car and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the house, looking at Marcus's car in the driveway. He looked like a man who knew he was in the wrong place but was going anyway. Bridget came through the door first, which told you everything. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes went from my face to the suit, to the folder on the table and back to my face. "Robert," she said, "you look. Sit down," I said. My voice was steady. I hadn't planned to say it that way, but it came out that way, and no one argued with it. They sat. Undime. Undime. Undime mine. Marcus tried to recover quickly. He leaned forward with the professional warmth he used with clients. "Dad, you look good. Listen. About the loan I've been thinking, and I might be able to work something out. A short-term bridge. You pay me back when?" "There is no loan," I said. He stopped. "There never was a loan. I made it up. I needed to see what you would do when you thought I had nothing." The room was very quiet. Bridget's expression cycled through several things quickly before settling on controlled. "Dad," Daniel said, let me finish." I opened the folder and placed 3 documents on the table. One in front of each of them. Your mother was not a woman without resources. She was, in fact, one of the more accomplished landowners in 3 parishes. She spent 31 years acquiring property that is now worth $4.3 million. I let that sit. Marcus's mouth opened. Bridget's composure cracked for just a second, a flicker of naked hunger crossing her face before she caught it. Daniel just sat very still. "The assets are held in a trust," I continued. "I am the trustee. You are contingent beneficiaries, which means you receive a distribution only if I choose to provide one." I tapped the document in front of Marcus. "As of this morning, I have not made that choice." Marcus found his voice. "Dad, this is okay. I understand you're hurt, but we're family. Whatever happened over the past week, we were stressed. We were grieving. People say things." "Marcus," I said, "you brought a real estate agent's business card to your mother's funeral reception." He said nothing. Bridget calculated my finances before we buried her. Bridget crossed her arms. Someone had to be practical. "My wife was practical," I said. "She was practical for 31 years without telling anyone about it. That is what practical looks like." I turned to Daniel. Drummond, 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 you told me that assisted living might be better for me the day after I buried your mother. You said you'd been discussing it with Bridget." Daniel looked at the table. "I'm sorry," he said. "It was quiet, and it might have been genuine, and under different circumstances, I might have let it be enough. I'm sorry, Dad. I was wrong." Marcus and Bridget kept saying, "You are 40 years old," I said, not unkindly. "Bridget is not your mother." He flinched, but he didn't argue. I stood up. I straightened my jacket. I had thought about this part for 2 days, and I wanted to say it exactly right. "I am not going to destroy you," I said. "That is not what your mother wanted, and it is not what I want. But I am also not going to hand you an inheritance you have not earned and do not deserve right now. The trust will remain intact. The land will continue to appreciate. In 2 years, if your behavior warrants it, we will have another conversation." I looked at Marcus. "That means I expect you to call me on a day that isn't about money. It means I expect Bridget to leave my house arrangements out of her calculations." I looked at Daniel. "It means I expect you to make your own decisions." I picked up the folder. "If that doesn't happen, the entirety of the estate will be donated to the school where your mother taught for 26 years. She wanted to fund a classroom technology program. I can make that happen tomorrow." "It's your choice," Bridget said. "You can't just—" And Marcus put his hand on her arm and she stopped. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Daniel looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "She knew, didn't she?" he said. "About all of it. She knew what we were like. She knew what you were capable of being," I said. That's different. I walked them to the door. Bridget left without looking at me. Marcus paused on the threshold and started to say something, and then seemed to think better of it, and walked to his car. Daniel stood on the porch for a moment. He looked at me, and I looked at him. He was his mother's son more than he knew, the same set to his jaw, the same eyes that went soft when he was ashamed. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "I really am." "I know," I said. "Show me." I watched them drive away, and then I walked back inside and took off my jacket and hung it carefully over the chair. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the backyard, at the garden Dorothy had kept for 20 years, the raised beds still holding the last of the fall herbs she'd planted in September. She had planted them in September, knowing she wouldn't see them come up in spring. She planted them for me. That was a Tuesday. The following Saturday, I drove to Denham Springs. Not because there was anything left to retrieve. I drove there because I needed to take the drive. I wanted to know what 31 years of it felt like. I rolled the window down and let the morning air in, and drove 40 miles through the flat Louisiana countryside with the radio off, and I thought about my wife. She had worn her second-best clothes because she thought what she was doing mattered, but she didn't want to seem like she thought it mattered. She had never said a word. She had come home every third Saturday and made lunch, and asked me about my week, and sat across the table from me, and carried this enormous secret with the same quiet competence she brought to everything else. I pulled into the storage facility parking lot and sat for a moment. The same heavy-set man was in the office. He waved when he saw my truck. I waved back. I didn't go to the unit. I just needed to take the drive. Over the following months, things settled into a new shape. I called Carla regularly. I started learning the land portfolio the way Dorothy had known it, not all at once, but piece by piece. I drove out to some of the parcels on weekends and walked the ground and tried to understand what she had seen in each one, why she had chosen it, what she had been waiting for. Some of it I understood immediately. Some of it I'm still learning. She was always smarter than I gave her credit for, which is a thing I will spend the rest of my life being grateful she forgave me for. Marcus called 6 weeks later on a Sunday afternoon. He asked how I was doing. He did not mention money. We talked for 20 minutes about football and about a project he was working on that he was genuinely excited about. It was the most real conversation we'd had in years. I don't know what it cost him to make that call. I know it cost him something. I appreciated it more for that. Daniel started coming by on Thursday evenings. He'd bring takeout and we'd eat at the kitchen table and talk about his week and mine. One night he started telling me about a problem at work and halfway through stopped and said, "Sorry, am I boring you?" And I said, "Daniel, you are not boring me. You have never bored me. Keep going." He looked at me for a moment with those eyes that were his mother's eyes, and then he kept going. We were in there for 3 hours that night. Bridget has not been back to my house. I don't know what that says about her marriage or about her. What I do think about is this. I spent 68 years believing I knew the dimensions of my life. I knew the square footage. I knew what held the walls up and what the load-bearing beams were. I was a carpenter. Understanding structure was the thing I was supposed to be good at. And for 31 years, I walked past a door in my own house every single day without knowing what was behind it. Dorothy didn't hide that from me because she thought I was weak. She hid it because she knew exactly how strong it would make me when I finally found it. She waited until the moment when I would need it most, and then she left me the combination. That is what love looks like when it is working quietly in the background. Not flowers and declarations, a padlock combination in a Bible, a letter in careful handwriting. You'll know what to do. And the extraordinary, terrifying, humbling faith that when the moment came, I would. I keep the card in my wallet now, tucked behind her photograph. Some mornings I take both of them out and set them on the kitchen table while I drink my coffee. Her face in the photograph and her handwriting on the card, the last things she gave me, and the most important. She was a third-grade teacher from Baton Rouge who bought scrubland and waited. She was the smartest person I ever knew. She was my wife. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. And if you know someone who has been quietly underestimated by the people around them, share this video. They need to hear it. Tell me in the comments, What would you have done in Robert's place? Was he right to give his sons a second chance? Or should he have walked away entirely? I read every single comment. I'll see you in the next one.